the certification of election. That has never happened before.
They have tried to stop the Electoral College.
I heard you doing this earlier today, and I thought by tonight maybe you'd sort of give this one up. I get what you're trying to do here, and it's a hard job you have. But there is no comparison.
I genuinely thought we were done with smug CNN MAGA commentator Scott Jennings on the topic of January 6th, but it turns out we still have some gas left in the tank, because late last night on January 6th, there was another CNN panel on the topic, and Scott Jennings was brutally mocked by a very fed up and exasperated panel, and we have to talk about it. But before we do, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, it's January 7th. You think we would be done talking about one of the worst days in American history, but Scott Jennings just won't let it go. So I'm going to play this panel, and it's about 3 minutes long, the conversation, the exchange between Scott Jennings and the more sane CNN guests. But I want to remind you of what this very smug MAGA cultist said on January 6th. Again, this is an op-ed he wrote on CNN. Trump caused this insurrection. So he referred to January 6th as an insurrection. I doubt he would do so today. And every Republican must condemn it. Scott Jennings, a CNN contributor and Republican campaign advisor, is a former special assistant to President Bush and a former campaign advisor to Mitch McConnell. So, this is literally an insurrection, is what he says. The fact that the U.S. military hasn't secured the seat of our government is already a failure of leadership by the commander-in-chief. Donald Trump caused this insurrection with his lies and conspiracy theories about the election process being rigged against him. It was not stolen, but this madness was fomented by Donald Trump and his top advisors over the past several months. His attorney, Rudy Giuliani, at a rally on Wednesday called for trial by combat to a roaring crowd. And he goes on like this. He refers to January 6th rioters as domestic terrorists. He blames Donald Trump morally and politically for it. He says that Republicans lost, Trump lost, and you have to get over it. I mean, he just goes hard in the paint on Donald Trump. Of course, 4 years later, Scott Jennings is singing a very different tune. As a matter of fact, he took the time to take shots last night at Vice President Kamala Harris for having the courage to do the very different thing than what Donald Trump did, and just accepting the results of the election and certifying her own defeat. And the whole damn thing took 30 minutes. There were no objections and no insurrections.
On this Harris business, I think before we canonize St. Kamala here on the high holy day of January 6th, let's remember the Electoral Count Reform Act of 2022 makes it perfectly clear that the vice president has nothing but purely ministerial duties on this day. She didn't actually certify the results of the election. That's done by the voters and the people of the
It was clear as day 4 years ago as well.
Right.
But because of the
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, nobody's trying to canonize her. The same thing was true.
Oh, they're not. I mean, she put out a video trying to canonize herself.
She was actually just saying it's unremarkable. That's true.
That's the opposite of canonizing.
I want to actually congratulate.
So we're going to play the rest of this exchange. It's about 3 minutes long, but you can already see where it's going. So Scott Jennings has no shame. He really doesn't. Like most MAGA Republicans, his shamelessness is his superpower. And yes, sometimes he gets triggered. Sometimes, I mean, he's usually defeated in the debate. There's no question about that. But very rarely does he feel genuine shame. But this is pretty embarrassing. Like, you can tell Adam Kinzinger, former Republican congressman, is on the panel, as well as S.E. Cupp, a Republican contributor. They're all, even the host, Abby Phillip, like all of the other people, all five of them are like, oh, Jesus, Scott, let it go, man. Your side is just worse on this issue, and it's important to acknowledge. And you did acknowledge it, Scott, 4 years ago. Why are you so desperate to try to create a false equivalence and to defend the Republicans on this day? But I should also point out, Vice President Harris does deserve kudos for doing what should have been done, honoring, respecting her constitutional obligation, and not following the path of Donald Trump. And you know damn well that if Vice President Harris even uttered a word of, or discourteous word, let's just say, Scott Jennings would be firing off op-eds. How dare the vice president, do this and this and this and this. It would be fodder for him. Even now, even though she handled things pretty much perfectly, he's still desperate to find some sort of false equivalence. And so this is where he doubles down on it. This is a 3-minute exchange. Brace yourselves for maximum smugness and stupidity from Scott Jennings. But thankfully, he gets shut down, and not even just by Kinzinger, who was there, but actually the biggest award goes to S.E. Cupp, who calls Jennings out on his bullshit.
True. That's the opposite of Canada. I want to actually congratulate the Democrats today. This is the first election since 1980.
He's doing this again.
This is the first election since 1988
Scott,
that a Republican won,
Scott.
and Democrats did not try to overturn the results on the floor of the Congress. So congratulations, Democrats.
I'm only interrupting you because we've heard this before.
We've played this.
Well, you've heard the truth before, but I thought it was worth repeating.
Here's the thing.
They should have. That's what I'm saying. The big mistake was, honestly, and I challenged people to do this yesterday on Twitter because I remembered the Scott Jennings op-ed on January 6th. I wish the tweet had gone viral because Adam Kinzinger and S.E. Cupp and I think it's Ashley Allison and Van Jones, they should have come prepared. They should have had a printout of Scott Jennings' op-ed on January 6th and just quoted it to him. Just every time he made a smug false equivalence, just be like, you know what, Scott, that's an interesting point. Here's an interesting point from a guy named Scott Jennings. You might appreciate this. And just read an excerpt of it. I wish they would have done that. It's so ridiculous, but we'll continue.
Parliamentary disputes.
There were not parliamentary disputes.
Mr. Speaker, a point of order.
No. That's not what happened. They tried to stop the counting of the votes.
Taking flagpoles and taking weapons and bursting into the Capitol to try to stop or delay or obstruct the certification of election. That has never happened before.
They have tried to stop the Electoral
I heard you doing this earlier today, and I thought by tonight maybe you'd sort of give this one up. I get what you're trying to do here, and it's a hard job you have. But there is no comparison. There is no comparison. And as Adam says, history will remember this correctly for several reasons. There are thousands of videos of what happened on that day. There are videos that the insurrectionists themselves took. There are CC videos. There are reporter videos, news cameras, videos inside the Capitol, outside the Capitol. We know exactly what happened. So to the Mike Collinses of the world, all I would say is, do you want to be on the right side of this in the history books, or do you want to be the villain in this story? Because in 100 years, your great-great-grandkids are going to know you as the wrong side of this issue, not the right side. And how is that going to feel? Because you can whitewash it as much as you want in the moment. There is no confusion, none, as to what happened. And it is not the same as someone on the House floor raising their hand and saying, I have a question about this vote.
That's not what happened on the House floor. They tried to stop the counting of the electoral votes in every election.
Wait, wait, Scott.
Yeah, I was there, man. So
when Al Gore certified the election, he did not even allow them to make the point of order. It was out of order.
How many weeks did he hold up the counting?
So real quick on the topic, because S.E. Cupp referenced a specific Republican congressman, Mike Collins, who said this, and it's really gross. On this day in history in 2021, thousands of peaceful grandmothers gathered in Washington, D.C. to take a self-guided, albeit unauthorized, tour of the U.S. Capitol building. Earlier that day, Trump held a rally where supporters walked to the Capitol to peacefully protest the certification of the 2020 election. During this time, some individuals entered the Capitol, took photos, and explored the building before leaving. Since then, hundreds of peaceful protesters have been hunted down, arrested, held in solitary confinement, and treated unjustly. Countless hours and taxpayer dollars have been spent pursuing innocent grandmothers and raiding Donald Trump's home, while terrorists and millions of illegal immigrants continue to cross our nation's borders, causing havoc in our communities. Thankfully, Donald Trump has announced that on day one of his presidency, he will grant pardons to non-violent defendants. So again, just a bunch of bullshit lies from a sitting Republican congressman, but that's what they do. It's really fundamentally no different than what Scott Jennings is doing here on live TV. It's moral cowardice, it's moral bankruptcy. And we all know if the shoe were on the other foot, they would be singing a very different tune. But because it's their cult and they have to, toe the line for their cult leader, they are willing to sing to truly shameless lows. But again, they are not politically punished for their shamelessness. They suffer no reputational consequence for their shamelessness. And so they're incentivized to continue.
Probably why. This is why.
You didn't hold up. Yes, for recount.
We probably won't be able to move on from January 6th. You're my friend, but I know you're smarter than that. I know that you're smarter than comparing what happened.
The country has already moved on.
No.
It's everybody today that's having a meltdown that hasn't moved on.
Trump keeps bringing it up.
We're not having a meltdown. We watched the vice president do her job, just as we had to wait 14 hours, but nonetheless watch Mike Pence do his job. And just as we commended Mike Pence for having the courage to stand up to Donald Trump, it takes when people lose, whether you're a child or an adult, it's hard to lose. That's why you don't want to be a loser. And
that's why Donald Trump couldn't
do it. That's why we actually are here, is because he couldn't be an adult. He couldn't stand up and say, you know what? The country is bigger than me. The voters decided 4 years ago. And today he still hasn't done it. Now, you can try and compare 2000 and 2004 and 2000, but that's not the same. And you can, I know deep down inside that you also know that what happened on January 6th, we have never seen anything like that in our lifetime. And God hopes we never do. And that was not what happened.
So we know you don't even have to like suspect, because again, I refer you to Scott Jennings' own words. And that's where I'm slightly disappointed by this panel that not one of them had the foresight to just print this damn thing off and read it back to him. Scott Jennings does know. Scott Jennings is dishonest. He's outclassed in terms of the facts, but he's not stupid. He's just smug and shameless, and he's hoping that people grant him, just an extraordinary amount of latitude to do these things. And CNN is hit or miss to the extent that they push back. I mean, even this, you could tell that they're exasperated and they're fed up, but they're treating Jennings with kid gloves over, again, to quote Ben Shapiro, Trump endorsing, Trump voting, Trump fundraising, Trump supporter Ben Shapiro, who referred to January 6th as the worst day in American political history since 9/11. And Scott Jennings is laughing about it. And we know he wouldn't be laughing about it if the shoe were on the other foot. But folks, it's important to push back on this. I'm glad that they push back. I'm glad that, SE Cup is like, listen, I know what you're trying to do, and I thought you'd give it a rest, but this is pretty pathetic. We have to the best that we're able, continue to push back on this, because Trump has gained some serious ground in terms of revisionist history, in terms of rewriting the record on January 6th. And facts do not speak for themselves. Not now, not ever. And facts don't speak for themselves even after you speak for them. So, for example, if you defend January 6th, which Democrats have done vigorously in terms of defending the actual record of what happened, well, if you stop doing that, it's not like these things have momentum. They truly don't. I'm worried sometimes that some people say, well, we've so vigorously defended the record on January 6th. We've done our part. Now it's time to wipe our hands and move on. No, if you stop doing it, the incessant propaganda from right-wing, just the right-wing ecosystem in general, they will move in to fill that void. And so it's incumbent on the rest of us who understand what happened that day, including, again, Scott Jennings understood what happened that day, to continuously, incessantly push back, because that's the only way that we won't further lose the narrative on January 6th. It's the only way that, the true record of history will prevail, is if we vigorously defend that record. And so, yeah, Scott Jennings, pretty pathetic. I wanted you to see that. I'm glad that the entire panel, including the host, pushed back on his false equivalence and his bullshit. And in the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.